What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Sarah 71 here, bringing another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Power Rangers Ninja Steel, episode 13. The episode is called Ace in the Race, and it's a pretty decent episode. It's mainly a filler episode, meaning that it's not one that adds to the overall story, but it's one that actually does do some character development and gives some, and focuses in on one character. So this episode focuses on Calvin, which is good. Although Calvin, we definitely have had a bunch of episodes already. He actually has had probably more than most of the characters, him and also Preston, and Brody and Levi. Like, those are the four main ones. Haley and Sarah still tend to be the least, and then all the minor characters, of course, that should be utilized a lot more. Again, I just wanted to give you guys that, but as far as the episode goes, the episode starts off with the Rangers each being told that they're on different teams. Well, not all of them are on different teams, but the thing is that Haley, Sarah, Preston are on the green team. Levi, Brody, and Calvin are on the orange team. And the thing is that what do you call it? Calvin ends up seeing some guy who Calvin looks up to, who has this really nice car, and he's considered to be like a really cool guy who likes cars and everything like that. And, you know, Calvin's all about, like, you know, automobiles and different vehicles, so, you know, he obviously idolizes the guy. So what ends up happening is that he ends up going over to Ace, and he ends up inspecting Ace's car, and and in the meantime we see the Rangers talking things over, and they're getting ready to prepare for a race. Then we end up seeing the villains back on their base discussing things about, oh, the name of the day is, you know, it's supposed to be like a race day, so they end up having a race monster. The race monster is called Shoe Spike. Shoe Spike is a monster that is pretty interesting. He's similar to another kind of monster in the senses that he ends up having an ability that can turn things into trophies. In this case, when he's summoned, he ends up making two of the you know, Basher bots turn into trophies, and that's the thing. It's similar to Motor Mantis from Lost Galaxy, if you remember that season, and that monster, where like Motor Mantis was able to turn two of the characters into trophies. But it's a different kind of story. So similar idea, different story. As far as what happens is, though, what do you call it? Shoe Spike ends up transforming into this guy's Bob Shoe Spike. Bob Shoe Spike ends up going down to Earth, and what happens is that the Rangers realize that Calvin ends up going to help out with Ace because Ace's car has some oil fluid leaking out, and Ace offers Calvin the chance to actually help with the engine a little bit, just to make sure that the oil doesn't leak out or anything. So Calvin takes up the offer. In the meantime, the others realize that they are missing a teammate because Calvin's going to help with Ace, and they understand because he's their friend and all that. But then they end up meeting Bob Shoe Spike, and Bob says that he's willing to help what do you call it, Brody and Levi out, so he ends up joining them. They end up holding onto a baton that Shoe Spike has, this baton has a special ability which ends up making Levi and Brody become ridiculously over competitive, but competitive in a very nasty way. So like, they'll do cheap tricks, they'll be dirty racers, meaning that they'll do things that will, you know, make them win, but in a way that's just cheap and unfair. So like, for example, like Preston's like knocked into a bush, and Haley falls over or something like that. So a bunch of different incidents happen just so that they can win, and eventually after they win, all the losers, which again, Brody and Levi and Shoe Spike won, but all the losers of the race end up, what do you call it, being turned into trophies, including Haley, Sarah, and Preston. So what happens is that also includes Victor. Victor ends up actually going on a little trip with a dog, where the dog ends up getting having the trophy knocked into a fish tank, because actually what happens is the dog ends up dropping the trophy. A guy ends up throwing Victor's trophy like a shot put, and then it falls into a fish tank with like a mermaid, and so he starts like saying all these goofy things about like about the mermaid, and you know how much he you know fancies her or whatever. You know what I mean. So all that happens. In the meantime, we end up seeing that Calvin is helping out, fixing the engine and everything, and you know, what happens is that Calvin asks Ace if he can help out with fixing the oil fluid or whatever, and the thing is that the oil fluid gets on him, and he's like, oh, I can't stand having anything on my jacket or whatever. And that's when Calvin says, well, how could you have done that if you were able to put together this whole engine? And so Calvin's obviously suspicious, and following this, what happens is that Ace ends up dropping the receipt, a receipt which actually says that he ended up paying someone to fix the engine, meaning that it wasn't him at all, and that in reality someone else had done all the work for him and gotten paid. But in this case, Calvin's doing it for free, which meant that, you know, he was using him, and Calvin felt like he had been betrayed by someone he had idolized. So then what happens is that he ends up talking to Mick, and he mentions how he feels that, you know, having a friend is a two-sided thing. You know, it's not just about you know, it has to be a mutual friendship on both ends, meaning that both Calvin and Ace have to be friends in order for it to really be a friendship, and that wasn't what it was. And then Mick mentions how, well, you know, you're saying, you're talking about this, but in reality, do you understand? Is that you're saying this, but is that how you actually feel, and is that what you actually think or whatever? Because Mick ends up showing him a baton from the relay race that he was supposed to be in with Brody and Levi, and that's when Calvin realizes that he had been doing wrong by his friends, at the same time as Ace doing wrong by Calvin. So he ends up going over, and what happens is that we end up seeing the Rangers in the meantime, and end up realizing, like, end up talking to Shoespike, because Shoespike actually turns into his monster form, and they discuss that they'll do a three-legged race, and if they win, then all the people get turned back from trophies into humans, and if they lose, then they lose their power stars. So what happens is that the Rangers get prepared, and they're also fighting with each other because, you know, they still have that competitive nature in their minds, so they're still under a spell that makes them become competitive and want to one-up each other, even if they're on the same team. Eventually, Calvin does join in, and we end up seeing him say that he'll join in the three-legged race, and what happens is that they end up starting the race, and what do you call it? Shoespike is racing, and he has two two bashers with him. The thing is that suddenly they become dummies, meaning that they weigh nothing and he can just run and he won't fall over. In the meantime, the others have to deal with each other, which in reality, they're like doing one leg at a time and doing things at appropriate rate, but in reality, they should have tripped over a lot more than they were. And so it seemed completely unrealistic, and probably just them going slower than they should be and then suddenly going fast. Again, it's unrealistic, but it's a show, and what are you gonna do? From there, they do end up winning the race, and suddenly Sarah, Haley, and Preston get turned big, and several of the other people do as well. Then what happens is that Shoespike summons some bashers, and then in the meantime, all the Rangers morph together and they begin to fight Shoespike and everything, and then Shoespike gets destroyed. And following this, what happens is that the Megazord gets summoned, and the Megazord and well, actually what happens is that the individual Zords are used, like, so first Brody's Robo Red Zord and Levi's Rodeo Robozor or whatever get summoned as well, and they end up fighting, and then Calvin ends up helping out, and following this, all the individual Zords help out for a little while, And then they end up using the Ninja Fusion Megazord. They use the finishing attack and destroy Shoe Spike. From there, we end up seeing the end bit, which is basically Monty wondering where Victor is. Victor going from his trophy form into his human form and actually being in the fish tank covered in seaweed. The episode basically ends there. It's pretty much a filler episode. There's not too much to it. I know I may have missed a few bits and pieces here and there, but as a whole, it really wasn't an episode that had a whole lot of information to it. It was a very, very straightforward episode. Episode 14 and 15 are going to be really, really good to watch finally, because those will actually expand on the story and they'll introduce a couple of new things to the show. But this one was fine. I'd love to know your guys' opinions, though. Did you guys enjoy episode 13? And are you guys looking forward to episode 14, which will be a really good one because it'll be story-based? Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next videos. Until then, guys, I'm Crazy Sarah 71, and goodbye, guys.